Welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast, a podcast from the home of Scrum. In this podcast, we feature professional Scrum trainers and other Scrum practitioners sharing their stories and experiences to help learn from the experience of others. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello and welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast. I'm your host, Dave West, CEO here at Scrum.org in a chilly Boston, Massachusetts. Today, I'm very lucky that with me today is Jay Rahman. He is a professional Scrum trainer based in the United Kingdom, though he spends a lot of time in planes and trains and all over the world, hotels, etc. So welcome to the Community Podcast, Jay.
Thanks, Dave. Good to be here.
It's great to have you, and I've got so many things to talk about and so many questions to position to you and ask you because you've been doing some really interesting work over the last 2 years. But before we get to that, I think our listeners would like to know a little bit about your journey to professional Scrum and how you got here. Can you sort of fill in our listeners?
Sure. Yeah, sure. No problem. So I've been in the IT and software space for about 27, 28 years now. So been doing this a while. Found myself as a young developer, kind of getting into delivery and learning all about development and really enjoying it. Went through the kind of levels up to lead, team lead, architect, all that kind of stuff. Found an interesting phenomenon in software teams, which was we couldn't deliver anything on time and to budget, and the scope was always going to be different. I mean, if you gave us a letter, we wouldn't be able to get it to the post box in time, right? That's the kind of phenomenon that we were dealing with at the time. So that kind of led me on a bit of a quest to figure out how can these really amazing, intelligent people working as a group, working as a team, working as a unified team, all with the same kind of ideas, wanted to get stuff out the door. How is it that we can't actually do it? And what are we going to do about that? What are we going to actually do about getting stuff done and delivered? So that was the question that kind of really sparked the journey. And then I found myself dipping into things like XP and RUP and all that stuff a long, long time ago, which finally led me onto getting into Scrum and really kind of diving deep into that space.
And where were you? What kind of industries, what sort of software were you writing and what sort of teams were you part of, Jay?
Yeah, no, so I was primarily, I was a Java developer. So Java was the technology space, primarily in financial services. So I started off in most of the asset management spaces that you probably know of. So Dun & Bradstreet, places like that, and Goldman's. So that's kind of where I've been. Deutsche, places where everyone kind of knows it's a high pressure environment. You have to get things done. The margin for error is very slim. And if you get it wrong and you make mistakes, then the ramifications, the consequences can be quite serious. Both from regulatory and from whatever the application that you're building. Sometimes you're dealing with millions and millions, and more recently billions and billions, right? So if you're building that kind of application infrastructure, you're building code that needs to do stuff. You want to service clients. You want to make sure that you're building something that's effective, that works, that delivers value, and most importantly, you have to make sure that you're getting it out there on time. Otherwise, you're going to be standing still next to your competition, and you're going to find yourself out of business. So, IT as an enabler and as a means for delivering strategies is becoming increasingly important now, as you know. But back in the day, way back then, it was super important. So you had to get it right. You had to get it right first time.
So it's always struck me as a little bit of an odd situation that these financial services companies obviously have been in the technology space for a long time. They're one of the first users of computers, and they are ultimately an information business. But they've always separated the technology from the business. Is that something that was slowing down some of these deliveries? Was that one of the challenges that you were facing when you were a young buck in the city of London, wearing one of your pinstripe suits?
I mean, so it's certainly a factor, right? And I think, back then and even now, the IT kind of infrastructure or the IT kind of, organizational element of a firm tends to want to be left alone to deliver whatever they're going to deliver, right? The business is basically told, hey, just give me whatever you want to give me and I'll build it and I'll give it to you and it's going to be fantastic. even we do a lot of agile sort of recoveries and program deliveries and stuff. And sometimes when a firm has been in there before and agile's been introduced to the business side of things, they get told, hey, we're going to bring in these product owners, we're going to own it all, it's going to be fantastic, there's going to be no change from your side, just write us a massive check and it's going to be great. And nothing can be further from the truth, right? So for an organization to be efficient and effective, we need to be thinking about how we can work as one, front to back. So the business needs to be absolutely engaged and responsible, and feel accountable for what's going on, as well as the IT side of things. We want to get across the idea that you're working as one. So it's not about silos. It's not about passing messages. Certainly not about blaming each other when things don't quite go to plan. It's about working as one, solving problems as you go, figuring out what really delivers value, then getting out, and getting it outdoor as soon as you can. And that can only happen when you're operating as one, you're operating as one whole unit, as an organization is supposed to be.
So what undermines these financial services organizations? What stops them from building cross-functional teams, delivering value? Ultimately, Agile isn't rocket science. It's you get a cross-functional team that have almost got all the skills necessary to deliver value. You point them at a clear problem with a clear customer. You empower them, enable them, and support them to deliver that. It's pretty straightforward. But what gets in the way, from your experience of all these financial services companies you've worked with? What gets in the way?
That's a big question, Dave.
I know, and that's the reason why I'm asking you. You've got a big brain, and I'd love to hear your experience. It doesn't have to be a definitive list, but some of the things would be great to hear.
I think there's a number of factors. I think what we have seen is we've seen transformations and changes tending to go on a continuum. So first, everyone thinks, oh, it's all about engineering, so they get into the engineering space. And like I said before, sometimes when Agile is sold as an experiment, it's sold as, hey, we're going to just do engineering work. And then that can only take you so far. So then they realize, oh, actually, we probably need to get into the product space and link up product ownership, professional product ownership, what that actually means, delivering value, making sure we're actually servicing our customers and clients, linking that with engineering so that they're operating as one. And that, again, that takes you to a certain point. And then suddenly they realize that actually we need leadership involvement. The leaders need to be involved so they can figure out what frictions are preventing these teams from delivering. And what we need to be able to do is leadership teams need to be really understanding what their role in agility is. And it's not just about mindset. You need the skill set that accompanies mindset. So I'll give you an example. We were talking to one as a CXO, and he was saying, oh, I really get the Agile principles. And we're like, yeah, obviously you believe collaboration is right. And he was like, yeah, absolutely. And who's gonna disagree with collaboration being a hallmark of agility? No one. But then I asked him, well, okay, so what are you going to collaborate on? And when are you going to do it? When are you going to make yourself available? Do you understand what you need to say and do? Who needs to be there? And then suddenly I got a blank stare. And then I said to him, look, the value of agility for you is this. If you were to leave the organization, I don't know, for a month, 2 months or whatever, would you come back to a stronger organization? And he paused for a second and realized that actually, I probably wouldn't have come back to an organization that was weaker, because they needed him there as a linchpin to keep the organization working. Now, every leader knows that that's not the right way to be, but who has the time, who knows how to manage their teams and build frameworks on organizations that get stronger when you're not there, become anti-fragile. Agility helps you do all that kind of stuff. So you've got different actions that need to happen at different layers, but most importantly, ownership needs to go, and accountability and knowing what to do is important throughout those layers, right? So we tend to find that those 3 layers tends to be where you tend to be looking. So leadership, product ownership, and engineering. There are challenges in every single layer, but you do need to address them in a holistic way.
That's super interesting. I love those 3. So from my experience as well, I often see organizations focusing on engineering, and then they realize that they're engineering the wrong things, or their alignment is a little bit off, and you've got these massive amount of dependencies and waste creeping in because of that. So then they go to the product and they start looking at product models and trying to build a product organization. And then they realize that after they've done that ultimately the direction, the support, the environment, the psychological safety is a mess. So then leadership becomes a natural next step. And surrounding all of that, obviously, is how do you measure success? How do you fund? How do you prioritize that sort of like broader investment and measurement kind of governance kind of model? It's super interesting. But I'd like to lean into something you said about linchpins and heroes. So I worked in the financial services sector, and so many years ago, we still had to wear suits in the city of London, and a message came down from the top when we could take our jackets off. Obviously, we didn't have our jackets
revolutionary.
on. Yeah, it was revolutionary. Yeah. This are the days when there was a big ashtray in the middle of your desk, and people used to smoke the early 90s. And heroes, linchpins, you called it, heroes, crucial people. And in fact, the entire reward system, promotions, was always around these heroes, these super crucial people that knew everything, that were if you left them, if they disappeared, the company or the system or the app or whatever, would collapse. Is that still the case in financial services?
It was, we were working with another senior exec, and he was telling me a bit about, Jay, and one of the things that we do is we deploy Scrum as a risk management approach, right? It's great at that. As a framework, as you know, risk management is core to it. Very many people don't really understand that as a concept, but I was explaining to them that, look, this is the way that you need to build an organization that thrives. Most importantly, that becomes resilient and is anti-fragile, right? Something that's going to get stronger when things go wrong. And he said, yeah, but Jay, you know what? Being the linchpin is great for job security. So great joke, but unfortunately, a lot of people think that way. I think also the way that people are rewarded. If you're great at whatever you do, like if you're a great engineer, you're brilliant at engineering, what tends to happen is you get rewarded for your skill set and you get elevated into a leadership position. Leadership requires a different skill set. It's not about being the smartest guy in the room. It's about bringing people together and bringing the right skill sets together, and then empowering people to do their jobs and eliminating the friction so they can thrive as one, right? That's what leadership is about. It's a different skill set, so you're rewarding somebody for becoming being a phenomenal engineer. So they're rewarded for their engineering skills, but leadership requires a different type of skill set. So I think the way that firms look at, upgrading people and giving people rewards and kind of promoting people is probably you need to review how that happens. But most importantly, you need to recognize that the skills needed in the leadership layer, regardless of where you are, middle management or upper leadership, are slightly different from those needed to be great engineers.
That's so true.
Yeah, but you're quite right. I know guys that are senior leaders, brilliant analysts. They were brilliant quants. They were, making millions and millions for their clients and stuff. And now they're managing teams, but the way they like to communicate is through email. So, they're not ones for, having conversations and figuring out problems and challenges. We were working with one team, actually. Their decision cycle time was 3 months when we first started talking to them. So 3 months to make a decision about what you're going to do. And that went from 3 months to 30 minutes, just by teaching them how to collaborate well, how to be focused in your conversation, how to use risk management approaches, which Agile is great at, by the way. Scrum is fantastic at if you know how to deploy them well. So what's the ROI on that? These guys are probably paid, hundreds of thousands a year. You've got, 5-10 senior leaders trying to make a decision, and it's going to take them 3 months. Now that sounds mad, but that's what happens, right? And unless you measure it and know about that, people don't realize that, hey, it took us 3 months to make this call.
Yeah. Decision latency is a significant problem in every organization. And if you increase the amount of complexity and also the impact, which is obviously if you make a mistake in, delivering a new, whatever, annuity trading platform or asset management platform, it can have a huge impact. So that increases often the latency of those decisions, because you want to get more people involved, and make sure that everybody's got a perspective on it.
Yeah, leaders tend to feel quite vulnerable, funnily enough, when you look at leadership, especially senior leaders, because they worry that if they get their decision wrong or something goes wrong, it's on them and their job security might be at risk. They're not in a position where making mistakes is easy. So what do? They spread responsibility. And when you start to spread, I mean, I remember working with one team. We told them, month X that the delivery that they originally planned is just it's not tenable. It took them 8 months to realize the truth of that statement. 8 months it took them, And where did that statement come from? The team. The team had looked at the work, reviewed it, understood it, estimated it, thought it through, put in a fudge factor, added contingency, and said, look, even if we worked, 24 hours, 30 hours a day, it would still take us far too much. This is like 4 times the amount of work. We need help and support now. 8 months later, the management team were like, oh, okay, maybe we should actually add more teams and manage the scope. Why was that? Because they were afraid of making a mistake, right? And they had potentially communicated things to senior leadership where it wasn't safe to say, hey, look, we've learned something new here. We need to revise our estimates. We need to think about what we need to do. We need to figure out a way to manage the risk. And so again,
can I bring in another area? So how, obviously, a lot of the leaders haven't got that experience of leadership. They're very good at the craft of delivering these financial services products, not necessarily leading teams doing that. So is there a role for Scrum Masters, Agile coaches to sort of like support that in a way? Are you seeing much support for that, bringing in those kinds of roles? Again, it's a very testosterone aggressive. A lot of these financial institutions are very, sort of like classic Wall Street, the movie kind of cultures, whereas the sort of classical Agile coach, Scrum Master, though very much focused on outcomes and delivering value and reducing waste, may approach it in a very different style. What's your experience in that in Jay?
So I think we found that you need a very specific type of Scrum Master and Agile coach. We come from the Scrum.org thinking, so obviously there is a little bit of bias here, but we're all about delivery, right? So the lovely thing about people that are thinking about delivery and releasing value is that they're focused on eliminating impediments, and they're really having that kind of drive to get stuff out the door is super important. There is a different kind of Scrum Master and Agile coach that's not so focused on delivery, and that's okay as well. They're more focused on the people space. What we found is that people actually love to deliver. So artists love to see their works of art on people, on the walls. Engineers love to see their engineering feats being used. I'm sure the guys at Tesla who built the Tesla love to see people driving around and staying safe, right? Delivery is such an intrinsic part of human motivation. So we find that delivery is super important. And so our whole ethos, as I'm sure you'll agree, right, is around that. So the Agile coaches and the Scrum Masters that we bring on and that we kind of introduce to our clients always have that focus, in line with the Scrum.org thinking. And that's super important, because that is what helps leaders, because leaders are really about success through delivery and safety through control. I mean, that's how leaders tend to think. How do I prove that I'm great? How do I prove that I'm good? How do I show value? I need to deliver stuff, whatever the organizational goals are, I need to get them out the door. So they need people who are advising them, that are thinking along the same lines. And then the safety through control element is, they're taught, most leaders are taught, we need to micromanage people and all this kind of stuff, right? But nothing further can be from the truth. There's other ways to help teams to figure out what's going on and keep a barometer in terms of how the teams are doing. You don't need to micromanage people. You need to give them space and autonomy, but at the same time, be able to check using the right tooling how they're doing and step in at the right place. Great Scrum Masters and great Agile coaches that come from that delivery mindset, and I think also really understand what the business is trying to do, are just a massive asset. That they can advise the organization how to shift their behavior, because delivery is not just about mindset, as I keep saying. You need the accompanying skill set to be able to do the behavioral shift. You need to know how to act in a certain space. When challenges come up, how do you manage that? Do you beat up your teams? Do you tell them they better get it done, or else? Do you tell them you cancel everyone's holidays? Or do you say to them, hey, what are the frictions you're facing? How can I help you? What can we do to get this job done? We need to get this done. This is the goal. This is the direction. This is what happens if we get it wrong, or this is what happens if we're late. What can we do to figure this out? Let's work together and make it happen. Which leadership approach are you going to use, and what are the triggers that are going to make you choose the right leadership approach. Those sorts of things come from coaching and mentoring, Scrum Masters and Agile coaches who are well-versed in delivery, understand the organization, understand the kind of pressures that leadership teams are facing. Those are the guys that are like worth their weight in gold.
I kind of wanted to drop the mic there. Ultimately, the best control is no control at all, and I think it's sort of like counterintuitive, when push comes to shove, when you're in a stressful situation, often you resort to being sort of micromanaging, lots of detailed spreadsheets, and ultimately it's the opposite. Focus on the outcomes, create the space, empower the teams to make the difference, and success happens. That is awesome. So we're coming up to the end. We like to keep these, as you well know, podcasts short so that people can listen whilst walking the dog, or maybe on their commute, or maybe even ironing a couple of shirts, though I'm not sure people do that anymore. So you're heavily involved in the transformation space now. That's kind of your thing, training as an enabler for transformation rather than being focused on just training. So tell me a little bit, the last thing I'd love to hear, if organizations are embarking on these transformations, I'd love to hear, the sort of like your leaving words around that. What would be the biggest and most important thing that they should concentrate on, do you think, Jay?
Wow. Okay. So I think the things that we have found. So we've done a lot of recoveries and a lot of transformations. I think part of the challenge is to keep it as simple as possible. I think a lot of the times firms and organizations want to go straight into scaling approaches, and they pick a mission critical program, which they think, right, we're going to deliver this. We're 30 teams. We're going to go to a scaling approach. It's going to be fantastic. And they don't take into account the fact that you have to help the organization learn, and there is a learning period. There is a time for which the organization is going to be learning, and they need to understand that actually there is a learning curve and a journey that the organization needs to go on. And part of that is going to be trying stuff, making mistakes, figuring out how they can adapt agility for their context and their space. That's all going to take time and effort. You have to be able to manage that learning journey with the delivery. So, for example, we did some work at an asset manager in Zurich, where they had kind of started a mission critical strategic program, hard deadlines, lots of things on the line. Tried to go down a route where it was traditional, potentially waterfall, brought in an army of consultants, like 15, 20 people, and just tried to like brute force crack it. They're a small firm, right? So they just, they were generating all kinds of overhead. I think they managed to burn through a significant portion of their funding really, really early. They asked us to come in and step in and support them. And we came in with a super small footprint, like 3 or 4 people, help those teams understand what agility is, help them figure out. I mean, obviously we use Scrum as the framework of choice. So no major scaling approaches, nothing like that. The only thing we did was we came in, figured out who their teams were, added Scrum Masters and experienced coaches. I think, like I said, the footprint was about 5 people. Saved them, I think, 5 million plus in consulting fees in the first quarter, and just help them deliver their socks off. We focused on the core elements of their strategy that made sense, delivered that real kind of 80-20 piece that really made a difference first, and iteratively delivered. And that's what we did. What we found was that their partners, what made this kind of really, really difficult was because there were so many different partners delivering things. There was a major transformation, strategic platforms, managing lots of different types of funds and all these sorts of complexities that you can think about, with lots of people involved. We found that the program team, especially the leadership team, who also operated in the Scrum framework, was starting to aggressively manage risk, because their whole thing was about how can we ensure that our teams really understand, take this on board. What can we do to eliminate the frictions of the bank that prevent agility from moving forward, right? So their backlog was around that kind of transformational organizational change. When we first started, the risk register was around, triple digits. We found that with the leadership team stepping in, and we had people from the CXO layer, all that kind of stuff, as part of the team, they were able to take those risks down from an organizational perspective, down to the 20s, and just keep it around that point. So managing the organizational change, eliminating challenges that the teams are facing day in and day out, in a cadence that worked for the team. Those are the kind of things they did. And they were managing the delivery, they managed the learning journey, and they ensured that they supported the teams with training, with whatever else they needed. I remember we got a space, just a space, they reorganized the team such that everyone could sit together, I think within 2 weeks. And that's unheard of. Normally a change in a bank like that, an organization just moving desks can take 6 months, right? They did it in 2 weeks because they understood the challenge, they understood the friction it was causing the teams. Teams came together in one shot, and then we started to see real acceleration. So managing the learning journey as well as managing the delivery, I think, is super important. We found that the leadership teams that really kind of do work as a team, that operate as an agile team, learn consistently. And I'm talking about guys that are looking at agility as a risk management space, right? So the retrospective, for example, we had senior leaders with 200, 300 people that reported up to them, in aggregate, turning up to the retrospectives because they themselves viewed the retrospective as a risk management approach. How is it that we as a leadership team, what are the risks that we are facing if we don't work well? Now, this happened pre-pandemic. Now, when the pandemic hit, these guys didn't skip a beat. They continued delivering, kept on hitting targets, had to work really, really hard to manage the risk, but they had a framework that really supported them, and they were using Scrum. Nothing more, nothing less. Super simple.
That's great, Jay. So ultimately, get to delivery as fast as possible, build a sort of leadership or change team around that uses Scrum to manage that backlog of impediments that's stopping the teams from delivering, and just keep going. I think that's the message that Jay sent today, listeners. So thank you so much, Jay Rahman from the UK, professional Scrum trainer based in the United Kingdom. Thank you for spending the time today. I'm sure our listeners, particularly people in financial services, but others, will appreciate some of the interesting sound bites that you provided.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Great. Well, this is Dave West here, your host of the Scrum.org community podcast. There's another thrilling installment, and this is just one of many. So if you like this, please subscribe to the channel and keep listening. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.